Welcome to Off the Court, a show dedicated to making you the best version of yourself as a player and as a person. I'm Coach Jack, CEO and owner of Close the Gate Hoops. If you're trying to take your life and game to the next level, this is the podcast for you. Let's get it. What up, gatekeepers? Back at you with another episode of Off the Court. Today we have an awesome topic that I've actually gotten a lot of questions on and seen people researching a lot of, and that's being nervous before big events or games, or sort of like pregame jitters. And this is extremely important because you're not only going to have big games in your high school, college career, but you're also going to have big events in the future where you're going to probably be pretty nervous for, and you're going to need to know how to tackle these things. So it's not just about the game, but it's also going to happen later on in your life. So why don't we have you, Coach Aaron, dive in a little deeper, why you want to talk about this, and what your thoughts are about being nervous before big events.
Yeah, so I was really happy when you picked out this topic because this was something I dealt with all the time. Not necessarily like in basketball, but when I was running, I definitely experienced like pre-race jitters or whatever. And there was a lot of things that I would do to try to combat that. Like so when I guess one specific example I can remember right before the state track meet, my stomach was just turning. I couldn't even eat anything before the whole day before that. So I remember when I got up to the line to race, I was actually like starving, like, cause I hadn't eaten anything, and everything that I like put near my mouth, I would get nauseous cause it was just so bad. But, a lot of the times when we are, when we have this nervousness before our games or races or whatever, it's cause we're picturing these negative outcomes in our mind. Right. Yep. And, a lot of my coaches would always tell me that a huge thing was visualizing our desired outcome. Right. So like the night before my races, I would try to lay in bed and just close my eyes and think about what I wanted to happen. Right. I would literally like almost watch the whole race in my head before it happened, like the night before. And a lot of times, it would get me a lot more confident going into the race. Another thing is, when you have like a pregame routine, so like thinking of things because any kind of routine will create some kind of stability and create like almost like it'll take the chaotic like thoughts that are going on in your head. It'll almost calm those down, and you'll be thinking about your routine instead. Right. Yep. And a lot of people have like superstitions or things like that. Whatever you really need to do to kind of get your mind from racing all over the place, right? Just slow your head down a little bit. It can be really helpful.
No, I thought you hit a lot of points there that I thought were really good, Aaron. The first one I thought of what you were saying is, in terms of nervousness and that feeling, we need to understand when we're in that moment that everyone else feels this too. Like to not feel like it's abnormal for what you're feeling, which is what I think a lot of kids think sometimes. Like they look at somebody and they're like, why doesn't this kid get nervous? They do get nervous. They just found a way to overcome those pregame jitters. Another point you hit on that was really, really good is the reason people get so nervous is because they're thinking about negative outcomes, right? That could possibly happen. And it's very important to know that your most dominant thoughts become reality, right? Whatever you think about the most is going to happen, right? So if you're thinking about the worst thing that could possibly happen for the majority of time before whatever your big event is, it's likely to happen, right? So it's okay to have those doubts, but you got to do your best to get rid of those doubts as fast as possible.
That's one thing that's huge that you were talking about, is that everybody, like, people don't realize that everybody has the same kind of thoughts, right? Yep. Like, you're not the only one that's getting nervous. You're not the only one that sees, like, because I remember when I used to run races against kids, I'd be like, dang, I'm kind of scared. These guys are pretty fast. But then I'd look at my times, and even if I was like the number one seed and I was like supposed to be the fastest kid in that race, I would still get nervous and be like, God, these guys are good. Like I'm scared. And in reality, they're probably thinking the exact same thing about you, right? But you don't think about that.
Yep. That's actually really, really good. Because when you think about, even this podcast is a good example. Like when I listen to a podcast or I'm listening to an Audible book, right? When I'm listening to it, I'm like, dang, these people have it figured out. They know exactly what they're doing because they're spilling all this knowledge that is really, really good, in my opinion. And then I have this podcast, and we get tons of compliments on this podcast about how good this podcast is about giving knowledge and information. And I struggle with tons of stuff that we've talked about throughout this whole entire podcast, right? And I'm sure people listening to it are like, man, these kids got it figured out. You know what I mean? But we don't. So it's so weird how that works.
Yeah.
because you're like you were
It is
saying,
funny, yeah. Because
you've been the 1 seed and you've still been feeling nervous. You know what I mean?
yeah, and I look at the other kids. I'm like, God, these kids are fast. These kids are really good. But even though I went in with a faster time than them, it's just weird how that works. How your brain kind of turns it around like that.
Yep.
And it is funny. I have thought about that before, like how like we get plenty of like good reviews and compliments on our podcast and stuff, and people probably think these guys, their lives must just go so smoothly, just perfectly go, no problems ever arise. But we deal with all kinds of hard stuff all the time, like that we like have no idea what to do or how to deal with things, and this, I mean, the more we talk about it and the more we like kind of get into things like this, it helps us too, right? Like teaching
100%.
people about it, like it helps us too. Like I've learned so much just from working with Close the Gate, that I wouldn't have known before that. Even though like I'm the one teaching it, I'm still learning as I'm doing it, I guess.
Yep, and it goes the same way. Like with me teaching you guys how to teach, obviously from the
Mm-hmm.
receiving end, you probably think that I know what I'm doing, and even though I just started a year ago. Half the time, these podcast episodes that we pick are stuff that were relevant to us throughout our lives. And I think a good example of this was Pregame Jitters. I started last scrimmage for Platteville, and we're ranked 5 in the country right now, so I was pretty nervous just because we're supposed to be really good, right? Even though it's a scrimmage, I was still had that type of feeling, I mean, it's not like your race where it's dang near ready to throw up, but I could feel a little nervousness, and that's why I thought
Right.
this would be a good
Yeah.
topic. But it's really important to understand, people listening right now, that it's so normal, whatever your thoughts or feelings are, and even we have them, even though we're talking about this information right now. Another thing that you touched on, Aaron, that was really, really good, that I honestly, I don't know if we have a separate podcast for this, but visualization, which is super, super important in terms of the outcome and performance of whatever your event is, right? Because the one of the most life staggering stats and statements that I ever heard in my entire life was that when you visualize something in your brain, like you close your eyes and you imagine it in your head, your brain can't tell the difference between something that was real, like actually happened, versus not actually happened, because your brain processes it as like a memory almost, right? So when you imagine and master visualization of yourself performing well, right, in your brain, it computes it as it already happened, right? It's a memory, so it makes it
Huh.
more likely for it to actually happen again. Which so it's like it's
That's pretty
almost like,
sweet. I didn't know that.
yeah, it's almost like tricking your brain, which is why most professional athletes are so big advocates of visualization, right?
Yeah.
And it goes hand in hand with the most dominant thoughts become reality, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
visualizing yourself, like you said on the track race, just dusting everyone, right? It's more likely to
Mm-hmm.
become an outcome.
One other thing is that we've also kind of talked about that relates to this topic is jumping in before you're ready.
Yep.
So like as soon as I noticed with all my races, I would be like ready to puke when I'm like before the gun goes off before we start. And then as soon as that gun goes off, the adrenaline hits and it's just gone. You're not nervous anymore. You're just going. So if you think about it, before the race, we're feeling worse than we are during the race or during your game, right? Because once you're in the game, you're not thinking about all the negative things that can happen. You're just it's moving too fast to be thinking about that stuff, right? It's crazy because we're so worried about it before, but then once it's actually happening, it's like there's no nerves anymore, if that makes sense. And I remember like there's like certain points where the nerve like they'll turn on and off, right? Like I remember before my first ever varsity basketball game, before the game, I was in the locker room just having fun, talking to everybody. I wasn't nervous at all. I wasn't even really thinking about it. And then we ran out onto the court to warm up, and I looked around, and there's so many people in the like around in the stands, and I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm nervous. But then once I got into the game, then again, I wasn't super nervous. You just gotta
Yeah.
you gotta be confident going in. That's the biggest thing, I think, and I struggled with that a lot. At least my junior year of basketball, like I struggled a lot with the confidence. But if you have the confidence, because only like only you can control your mind, right? And only you know what you've done to prepare for this and
Yep.
all that, right? So it's basically you're just kind of trying to prove yourself. You're trying to like make yourself proud of yourself, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, I think it's in my opinion, it's a 4-step process with handling these pregame jitters, or I should say nervousness before big events. And the first one after, and I've just been doing this as you've been talking and I'm trying to put it all into my head, but the first step is obviously acceptance, right? Acceptance that it's a normal feeling to have. And it's not something you should be stressing over, that you're actually having that feeling. The second is
Yeah.
preparation, right? You're going to have a lot less nervousness if you put in the work, right? If you've been in every situation that you could be in, right? There's not a lot to be nervous about because you've done it a million times. Steve Nash said he was such a good free throw shooter because he's done it thousands of times before. So he's prepared for it, right? He doesn't get nervous. Say there's 2 seconds left in the game and he needs to make both free throws for them to tie the game, right? In his mind, he's like, I've done this 1,000 times. So preparation is extremely important in terms of getting rid of nervousness, right? In before the big events. And then the third that I put down was visualization, like you said, right? And one thing I want to say too that's really important with visualization, yes, we want to think about things that have happened, but another really good thing to do is actually think about things that have happened before, right? To boost your confidence. So another, or something I like to do before games is watch highlights of me playing. Say I'm playing pickup or something, or my home court app records my shooting workouts, and I'll just click my makes, right? So I only see the makes from my workout. That's going to be confidence boosting, and things like that. Or like the buzzer beaters I had in high school. I like to think about that to boost my confidence. So for visualization, it's good to think about things in the past and how you want things to happen in the future, because it's all about getting yourself in the mindset that you're going to do well. And then the fourth thing that I think's huge for the structure of getting rid of nervousness is routine, like you said. And I think golf is a great example because golf's kind of like free throws in basketball, because you have so much time to think about this, like one shot or one rep of the swing of golf, right? So having that routine to keep your mind centered, like you said, so it's not racing, right? So Phil Mickelson, I don't know what this book I was reading said, but he had like it's like a 90, I don't know if it's a 90-second, maybe 60-second routine before he shoots every golf ball, but it's like the same thing every time. So like, what do you call it? The people that carry their bags?
The caddies.
The caddies, right? So the caddy gives him his clubs, and then he goes through the 60-second routine. That's literally the same every single time before he swings the golf ball, right? So that keeps his mind centered, and keeps it from racing, which I think is really, really important.
And that just goes along with how important the mental side of just every single sport is. People don't understand how important the mental side is, and that can be the difference. It can really change your physical performance as well, because when you're and when you're going in, you're shaking, picturing negative things in your head, right? Negative outcomes, then they're more likely to happen, and your shot's going to be just a little bit weird. You're going to lose a dribble because your hand shaking, or things like that. Like, it can actually really affect your physical performance too.
No, 100%. And I just want people to know that mental part of the game is so, so hard, right? We talk about meditation and all this other stuff to help you with your mental game. It's way easier said than done, right? So we can make it sound easy, but it's a lot harder to actually practice and master. Because once you get into a routine with your physical part of your body, I think that's a lot easier to maintain. But mentally, you run into these problems that you really never ran into before. And another great example, right? We have an ebook, How to Unlock the Mental Side of the Game. When you read that, you're like, man, this guy's got it all figured out, right? And even I still struggle with it today. You know what I mean? So just knowing that it's completely normal.
It is important to know the information. It's just a little bit harder to like actually apply it to,
Yep.
And we don't even think about, like, I never even realized, like, I didn't even think about anything mental until I was in like my junior year, until I got to varsity basketball. And if people know like how important that mental side is when you're younger, and it's obviously harder when you're younger and you're not as mature as you are when you know grow up a little bit, but that mental side, if you're able to like understand how important it is, like at a younger age, it can be so helpful for you to get into that like at an earlier age, because you can start to build that earlier.
I totally agree. And another thing too, that's probably the most important out of everything that we've talked about, is at the end of the day, whatever's going on probably doesn't matter that much. Yes, it's a big game, but a quote that really centered myself one time was, you forget 99% of your life, right? So if you actually sit down and think about that, I forget 99% of my life, right? So whatever's happening right now, it's very unlikely that I'm going to remember this, right? So we got to take a step back and think, at the end of the day, this is not a big deal. So we shouldn't be making it a big deal in our head.
Yeah. Well, when I think about it, and we say this too, like when we're doing our workouts, but when I think about it, like I don't think I can remember a single shot from when I was in 7th grade or 8th grade, like a single shot that I ever shot. And it's not trying to make, the 7th and 8th graders, like, your games, like, obviously you want to play your games hard and you want to, try to make shots, but like, I can't remember a single shot. So it's like, when you miss a shot, don't freak out. It's not that big of a deal
And
in reality.
a lot of times what happens in our head is that we think people are thinking, like talking about us, right?
Mm-hmm.
People aren't talking about us. People aren't thinking about us. We overinflate that every single time.
Oh yeah. That was it's kind of funny the way they put it into words, but it was a huge piece of advice that I learned, that like nobody is really thinking about you as much as you think you are, right?
Yep.
Because it's like you walk through the hallways and you got a stain on your shirt. I have a great example here. So I have this hat that I ordered off of this like fake website, and actually I'm gonna grab it really quick. It's this hat that I ordered off of a fake website, okay? And if you can see there, it says Los Angeles, but can you see how they spelled Angeles?
Yep.
There's two S's at the end. So it's spelled completely wrong. I wear this hat all the time. Nobody will ever notice that, right? And
Uh-huh.
a lot of people would think, right, oh, I can't wear this hat. It's Angeles is spelled wrong. It'll look stupid. But in reality, nobody is paying that close of attention to anyone else but themselves.
When you walk down the hallway, you think people are looking at you,
Mm-hmm.
but the other person is thinking about people looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's so weird to think about that stuff sometimes. I think that's a great example.
Everyone is way too focused on themselves to be thinking about like what other people are looking like, right?
And
And you think that people are constantly judging you or constantly like making assumptions about you or just looking at you and like thinking things, but in reality it's just not happening a lot.
100%. And that's also extremely important to know to get rid of nervousness. Another good example, you talked about track races and stuff, and I talked about the scrimmage I started earlier in the year. Another good example is when I talked in front of the Adams School. And I think I've said this on another podcast before, but I had talked in front of like 100 kids, and they're all 7 and 8 years old, and I was sweating buckets before I went to talk to all these kids, right? And obviously that's another great example of us overinflating everything in our head, right? Thinking about the worst possible thing that could happen, right? But step one is something I don't think in that moment I did a good job of observing, is acceptance, right? Thinking that it's totally normal for me to be nervous, and it is, right? If anybody gets in front of people to public speak, obviously if you do it many times in a row, it's going to become less nerve-wracking, which it has for us at Close the Gate. But accepting that that's normal. Preparation, I definitely did a good job of. I was ready for it. It was the CTG notebook is what it was mainly about, and obviously I made that so I knew how to talk about it and things of that nature. Visualization, I probably could have done a better job of. I didn't visualize myself killing the speech, but I did, so that could have helped me with it. And then routine. That's another great example of it. If any other kids, right? I remember when I was in school and I went to do some public speech that I was extremely nervous for. It's just really about settling yourself down and going through those 4 steps.
And a lot of times when we're thinking about the worst case scenarios, what we're thinking is actually worse than the actual worst case scenario, right? Because like if you're like, when you're going up for a shot, worst case scenario, you miss the shot. Not a big deal, but you think it's way worse than it actually is, and it's not actually the worst case scenario. But try to like not think about those worst case scenarios. Think about the best case scenarios like we talked about. And rather than becoming nervous for things, you'll start becoming excited for things because you're picturing those best case scenarios. You know?
And that's also extremely important, is to know the difference between excitement and nervousness. Because I think people get that mixed up a lot too. Trick your brain into thinking that the nervousness you have is actually excitement. Right. A good example is like when you wake up on Christmas Day as a kid, like that type of excitement. In terms of emotions, it's very similar to how you feel when you're nervous. Like personally for me, before a basketball game, it's like almost a combination of the two. So I think it's also very important to try and switch your brain and trick your brain into thinking that it's excitement.
And being nervous is just, it's a natural reaction. It's not like a super bad thing that you're right, that you're having. You want, like, I mean, you almost want to be a little bit nervous before games. That shows that you're still passionate and you care a lot about it, right? That's pretty
100%.
much all that is. And then the excitement is more about you're just picturing yourself, or that it's going to be enjoyable for you, like it's going to be fun for you. The nervousness just comes from the again, like we've said, like you're assuming negative outcomes, or you're assuming bad things are going to happen.
So I obviously had to go on Google, like you were talking about. Nervousness is an emotion that we have to have, right? And so the real reason we have nervousness is to increase adrenaline production, right? And another good way to think about it is adrenaline's really good for us in terms of actually athletic performance. When you're in pregame warmups, that's probably the highest you'll ever jump as a basketball player, because you have all your adrenaline rushing through your veins.
Yeah.
So that's one way we could turn nervousness into an actual positive. So being nervous is actually good in terms of athletic performance.
I guess, like, kind of like we talked about earlier, how, you know, you're a lot of nervousness can also come from wanting to like prove yourself to other people. And that was something I was always trying to like impress people, and I wanted people to think that I was good at sports. And that was like a huge thing for me. But that definitely resulted in me being more nervous too, because it was just one more external factor that I really didn't have control of, right? That I was thinking about. And if you're not worried about those other people's perceptions, and you're worried about just your preparation, right? And how that will make you successful. And you're really just, like I said before, you really should just be trying to make yourself proud and be happy with your own results, because that's, what's more important. And it's about like, enjoying it. And if people are just going to like talk bad about you for whatever you do. So it's like, if you're just listening to that, it's just not going to be as fun as it could be.
Yeah.
You're not going to enjoy it as much.
And the feeling of nervousness is really just the grip of pressure that you put on yourself, right? So it's just like with everything, the only person getting in your way is yourself, right? And your own thoughts and your own brain. To recap, with Coach Aaron, the first step to getting rid of pregame jitters before big events is acceptance and observation, right? Knowing that everybody else goes through it and it's completely normal to have what you're having. The second thing is preparation, putting yourself in whatever moment you're in, hundreds and hundreds of times before. You did your best. There's nothing else you could possibly do, right? So obviously there's nothing to be nervous about. The third thing is visualization. Think about success in the past and in the future. Your brain cannot tell the difference between something that did not happen and did happen, right? In terms of how we visualize things. Like a good example, like in high school when we beat East and I visualized that in my brain, it's using the same part of my brain as it would be to visualize myself doing that in the future, right? Of making a game-winning shot. So it's really important that you utilize that skill to manifest your own destiny, right? Your most dominant thoughts become reality. And then the last thing is getting into a routine. Find a pregame or pre-speech routine that gets you into the zone and stops your mind from racing. Those are the four things of what I would do to stop getting nervous before games. And to remember, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. You forget 99% of your life. So just look at the big picture and center yourself. You want to go through a quick speed round, Aaron?
Yep.
All right, I got a good one. What do you think of this old Aaron Rodgers fiasco?
You know what? I don't really care what he does. I like his little what did he say? He said something about how the left was gonna hate him, but the right was gonna crown him, and he really wasn't worried about either of them. He was, all that, there's a lot of that's just another external thing for Aaron Rodgers to worry about. And if he can just push that out of his mind, that'd probably be the best thing for him.
I mean, it's become extremely political, and I'm not a big politics guy.
No, me neither.
I do think Rodgers should have admitted to lying.
Yeah,
because he kind of denied that. He avoided that question.
Yeah,
He's
an odd figure. He kind of just does. He kind of moves at a pace that nobody else does.
I mean, maybe that's.
Yeah.
Oh well, he wins as long as he's playing QB. I really don't care.
That's true. I liked Jordan Love though. He looked pretty good against the Chiefs.
He threw some ducks though.
You know what? He was getting blitzed all game. The offensive line, which I thought would be like the least of our worries, was not helping him. Our defense played pretty well, but we just couldn't really get in the end zone. Yeah.
This episode, he needed this pregame jitter episode.
Oh, I bet he was so nervous.
Oh, and again, it'd be totally normal. Imagine yourself starting your first game going to the
Mhm.
Chiefs.
Exactly. So college basketball starts tonight. Badgers play tonight. What do you think about the Badgers this year?
We'll see. I didn't have really high expectations for them because it didn't. Brad Davison was the only one that came back.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's gonna be an interesting year.
I think we're going to be terrible, but I think we're going to be fun to watch. So I'm
Okay,
kind of excited.
that's a good
You know
take.
who's looking good though?
Who?
UCLA. They're preseason
Oh
ranked
my
number 2.
goodness. Who's won?
Gonzaga, I think.
Okay, that's actually
But
cool.
UCLA is number 2. I'm riding with the Bruins this year.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you're sticking with them after Lonzo left.
Yeah, dude, they're fun to watch. They had a sweet Final Four run last year.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
They're an 11
And
seed.
they're pretty much returned everybody, I think. I
They
think there
could.
might have been like one person they lost. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
they could be really good.
all right, I have one last question. What
Okay.
is your road trip gas station haul? Like you stop at a gas station, you're in Tennessee, starving, you need something, you're thirsty. What are you getting?
That's really good. I've been staying away from energy drinks lately because they're not very good for you. But I'd probably get an energy drink if that's the only source of caffeine that I could get. In terms of, let's think, a candy. Oh, my favorite candy is either probably pretzel M&Ms or peanut butter M&Ms. So I'd probably get one of those. That would be
We're good.
my gas station haul. What about you?
I think mine would be I don't know, man. Reese. I think the Reese's peanut butter cups I would get. You know, this might sound weird, but I really like those almond joys, and
Oh,
I get those every once in a while, and people think it's weird that I get those, but they're so good.
no, I love those.
They're so good.
I don't know why
Nobody
people
else
don't like
likes them.
them.
I don't know. Try an almond joy. They got to be kind of good for you too. Almonds, coconut, right?
Yeah, this is a sponsorship for Almond Joy.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And then I guess one more. I gotta pick my drink too. My drink would be I'd get a Gatorade, red Gatorade.
Gatorade.
That'd be my drink.
I like it. Well, thanks again, gatekeepers, for listening. Just remember, the first step to not being nervous before games: acceptance. Second, preparation. Third, visualization. Fourth, routine. I'm Coach Jack. This is Coach Aaron. We out, baby. Peace. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Off the Court. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please don't forget to leave reviews if you haven't yet. This helps us with engagement and helps us rank higher to make an influence on more basketball lives. I also strongly encourage you guys to check out our free ebook download that's 25 pages long, How to Unlock the Mental Side of the Game. I was a player that was constantly grinding and constantly working, and it was really hard for me not to see results from the amount of work I was putting in. But this ebook that I wrote dives exactly into those types of questions. I was completely ignoring the most important part of basketball, which is the mental side of the game. So the 25-page ebook that I wrote is for you guys to give yourselves a leg up on your competition and almost like a secret weapon. I call it the basketball cheat code. Also, check out our website, ctghoops.com. On there, we got tons of programs that you guys can download to make yourselves a better basketball player. We have the CTG Productivity Notebook, helping you guys become addicted to productivity. Of course, in-person training. We are located now in multiple cities. And then we have the CTG blog, free education on becoming your best basketball self. Lastly, follow all our social media pages at CTG Hoops, where we post multiple times a day, trying to make you the best player and person that you can be. All the links for these are down in the description below. Thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys check out all the other episodes of Off the Court, and make sure you're ready for next week's episode. I'm Coach Jack. We out, baby. Peace.